and let us all do we can to build a better future.
There's a list, a censorship list. Before we pull up this article, look, this story is bigger. The situation with Joe Rogan, it's bigger about Joe Rogan. This is not just about him specifically. This is the danger of censorship, cancel culture, and being easily triggered. Look, in this day and age, you're going to run into people on social media that are, well, you'll run into people whose opinions you don't like. But the thing is, we have to have an exchange of ideas. Now, we've mentioned on the show how Medicare for All, UBI, Federal Jobs Guarantee Act, ending regime change wars, and investing in our infrastructure are universally popular amongst all voters of the entire political spectrum. But the thing is, the neoliberal establishment, corporate media, the political establishment, and of course those coveted blue check marks are always easily triggered by those that speak out against the neoliberal narrative, the corporate narrative. And recently, this just came to my attention, but on social media right now, you have individuals who have blue check marks that are making a list of who was on Joe Rogan's show, who's a leftist, who's a right-winger, who's this and who's that. And I have to say, this is getting way out of hand. Look, if you're so offended by Joe Rogan, and let's actually keep the article up here. If you're so offended by Joe Rogan, don't watch his content. If you're offended by a comedian, don't watch your show. If you're offended by an artist, don't go to their art gallery. If you're offended by a movie, don't watch the movie. If a TV show offends you, don't watch the TV show. I mean, are people of the boomer generation, Gen Xers, millennials, and Gen Z, are we all that easily triggered? The answer is no. You have a handful of quote-unquote authoritative people who have a platform that are easily triggered and want to dictate to you, the audience, who is what and who is where, making a list, dividing us further. So what's going on? I have an article from RT America. Shh, don't tell Rachel Maddow. She might crap her pants. Don't tell TYT. They might foam at the mouth. So apparently, according to this article, Tulsi Gabbard, Russel Brand, labeled as right-wingers in Joe Rogan's show. So as podcaster Joe Rogan faces numerous calls for Spotify to censor or even drop his popular Joe Rogan Experience podcast for allegedly spreading misinformation about the pandemic, pundits have taken to sharing a graphic purporting to prove Rogan's right-wing bias through a selection of guests labeled as right-wing has left many confused. Joe Rogan's fans often point to his fig leaf endorsement of Bernie Sanders as proof that Rogan isn't right-wing, pundit Matthew Sheffield, again, pundit. These bastards deserve a slap in the mouth. Tweeted in a thread critical of Rogan. Sheffield then shared a guest list splitting up various Rogan guests as left or right wing. Wow, that must be such a long list. I hope it's critical. I hope it's right, on point. Names on the left include Edward Snowden, the Young Turks founder, Cenk Boy Uygur, the guy who got slapped around by the DNC during the last election cycle. The right-wing list included names of outspoken conservatives like musicians Ted Nugent, the Daily Wire co-founder Ben Shapiro, but also were included Democratic former Hawaiian representative Tulsi Gabbard, comedian Russel Brand, UFC president Dana White, among others. So again, let's actually pull this up right here. You should see the tweet if we can scroll down. There we go. So this is the individual that's posting it, and then there's the list. If we can scroll down. There's a list. There's that list. Wow, what an incredible list right there. We actually get that. All right, I don't know if we'll be able to zoom in, but that's how big that list is. Now, Joe Rogan has had a popular show for quite some time. Where's Bernie Sanders on that list? Where's Dr. Cornel West? Where's Andrew Yang? Where's all these other quote-unquote leftist people at, or people who would identify as leftists? You know, Joe Rogan's had a lot of scientists, activists, philosophers on his show, and I don't see them anywhere on that list. That's like a very biased list. Whoever made, again, Mr. Sheffield, you didn't do your research properly. I mean, Joe Rogan's had a lot of people on his show. Seems like you're just doing this just to get some clout and want to join in the conversation about, we should censor Joe Rogan now. This is the bullshit problem I have with censorship right now. You have individuals dictating what you, the audience, should and should not see, and then also vilifying certain people who've been on Joe Rogan's show, and whether they're left or right. I cannot take the SJW or censorship cancel culture serious anymore. And if they're going to be attaching themselves to the Democratic Party, and if they're going to be influencing policy or political decisions, I think it's time for them to basically reflect on how they're furthering dividing us. This censorship is not the answer. This silencing people is, again, it's all what you're going to do is create bigger echo chambers. So continuing on. Tulsi Gabbard, again, remains a Democrat, but has received backlash from liberal activists for her criticism of fellow party members like Hillary, the warmonger Clinton. Meanwhile, Brand, who has openly expressed support for liberal causes, has been labeled socialist in the past, has similarly received backlash in recent years for his criticism of Hillary, the warmonger Clinton, as well as his views on the pandemic restrictions, recently being among the voices offering public support for the Canadian Freedom Convoy. Critics question the inclusion of the names, as well as others like comedian Tim Dillon and former New York Times editor Bari Weiss. The left-wing list was also brought into question as it missed some big guests who could very well be considered left-leaning, like filmmaker Oliver Stone, who was on the podcast twice as recently as last month, as well as comedian Pat Oswalt, and outspoken Donald Trump critic and CNN House expert Sanjay Gupta. They put Tulsi and Tim Dillon as right-wing too. Cathedral operatives use left-wing and right-wing to mean in-group and out-group. Podcaster Michael Malice, who was included on the right-wing list, tweeted, Rogan himself has never aligned with any political party, criticizing both Democrats and Republicans, though he's described himself as a progressive. He has, however, endorsed and voted for libertarian and libertarian-leaning candidates in the past, such as former Representative Ron Paul and former Libertarian presidential nominees Gary Johnson and Joe Jorgensen. So, who's tired of this censorship culture? Who's tired of the cancel culture? Type 1 if you're tired of it. Type 2 if they really need to shut the hell up. Because there's nothing that they're bringing to the table at this point. Let's actually add some democracy. Let's do that again one more time. Seriously. I mean, it's got to come to an end now. I cannot take this cancel culture and this censorship seriously anymore. Because when we had Nick Brown on our show, we talked about how YouTube is censoring independent media. Everyone that's quick to censor or silence anyone who has a different opinion, you do realize that you're also putting content creators that you respect and like also on the chopping block. There was a time when YouTube used to be a meritocracy. There was a time when, again, you can have an exchange of ideas. But for some reason, everyone's so easily triggered. And what it is really is that corporate media and the political establishment are jealous of people like Joe Rogan who actually have a podcast, who are more popular and people follow them. We recently did a show where, again, we showed numbers where ABC, CBS, CNN, MSNBC, Fox News are struggling with viewers, whereas Joe Rogan's show is universally popular. Jimmy Dore has talked about this. The Mikasa Sukasa Network has talked about this. Other independent media networks have talked about this. The neoliberal narrative is struggling right now, and their only answer is cancel culture. It's time to break away from it. It's time to wake up. And who are they to dictate to you, the audience, what you should and should not see? Let's actually have one more voting in the chat. Type 3 if you can make your own damn decisions of what you want. Type 4 if you really do trust the government and the media to dictate to you what you can and cannot see. With that being said, it's time for us to wake up and break away from neoliberal media and the two-party system, and to hell with cancel culture.